friends. Happy Wednesday. You know what this means. It is time for Business Accelerator TV series. I'm Sarah Rose and I'm coming to you live from Charleston, South Carolina, my home office here, where I mentor female entrepreneurs with online business strategies, simplifying those strategies to overcome the overwhelm and help you start or scale your amazing, successful global business. So I've got today as my guest, Krystal Proffitt. She is the host of the podcast, the Proffitt podcast, and she's also an amazing author and coach. We're going to be sharing all things strategy and mindset. And let me see if I can bring her on here. It's coming on right now. Joining us. We've had a little bit of technology issues, Mercury retrograde, but here she is. Yay!
Hello. Oh my goodness. Hi. I haven't done a Facebook Live with someone else in a long time. So I'm like, have things changed? I was looking for you and I was like, wait, I don't see. So can you hear me
Yes, it's
okay?
perfect. And this is actually the easiest one that we've had in weeks. So yay, technology's on
Yay.
our side today. That's awesome. How are you?
Right. I'm good. I'm good. It's actually kind of chilly here in Houston today. So I'm like, what's happening? And I'm hoping it doesn't rain on Halloween, right? Like as a parent, we're always like, please just don't let it rain. And then in Houston, we're like, let it not be over 90
Yes.
degrees. So we're all sweating in our costumes and all the things.
Yes, well,
So
fingers crossed. I would love it if it would get a little cooler here, but it is what it is for the moment. Well, I was just welcoming our guest, just kind of getting everybody kind of checking in to say if they're watching us live, give us a hashtag live. If you're catching the replay, give us a hashtag replay. And if you're new to myself or Krystal, give us a hashtag newbie. And no matter where you are, let us know where in the world you're listening from, because we love to know who our audience is and who we're connecting with. Krystal, our audience today is most likely going to be a female entrepreneur who's looking to either start or scale her business. And so to let us know kind of where you are in your journey, to give us a one if you've got a call in your heart, you know that you're meant for something more, you know you're getting ready to take this journey as a female entrepreneur, but you might not have actually taken that first step, or baby steps, right? Give us a 2 if you already have a side hustle but you're looking to transform that into a thriving business, or give us a 3 if you already have a full-blown business of your own but you're looking to take it to the next level. That way we can make sure that our message is resonating with you. So let's dive in. Krystal, tell us a little bit about you and who you are and how we found each other and how we're here today.
yes. So it's so funny because I love talking to entrepreneurs that may be where I was a few years ago because for a long time I was just absorbing other people's stories. Like I'm a podcaster and it's we'll get to that in a second, but I have always been obsessed with people's stories. I love memoirs. I'm not a huge reader, but I just love knowing like the behind the scenes of how, someone famous like got to where they are today. So if you are a brand new baby entrepreneur, I hope that you find a little bit of yourself in my story. But I was, like most of us start out, I went to college and then I went to work in the corporate world. And then I was like, oh, I don't think that this is actually what I want to do with my life. and then I started staying at home. I was at home with my kids for a few years before I was like, okay, I can't be the Pinterest mom that I thought I really wanted to be. There was like so much wrapped in pressure and overwhelm and trying to do that. And so I started looking for other ways to find myself, find my purpose on this earth. What am I supposed to be doing? And in that process, I started writing and I thought, oh, I'm supposed to be a blogger. I'm supposed to be the #1 blogger in the world. That's what I'm supposed to do. I laugh when I say that because I'm a terrible blogger. I was a very unsuccessful blogger, and that's just part of my journey. And but through blogging and trying to navigate the online business world and understand it, because I had no idea that any of the things that are online existed until I started tinkering around. But then I fell into podcasting. And I started podcasting for about 6 months, and then people started asking me, well, how do you have a podcast? How does this work? And so And I just kind of ignored it for a while. I was like, no, that's not what I'm doing. I'm doing this thing over here. But people kept asking me about podcasting. I'm like, no, like it's okay. You know, I'd answer them and say, here's what I did. But now I have just fully embraced. I was actually one of my mentors challenged me. She said, you know, there is not a leading female podcaster in the podcasting space. There's a lot of people that are doing it, but there's not someone leading the pack. So she kind of gave me this charge of, what isn't that, like, why isn't that you? And I was like, oh, because I'm not ready. I don't know what I'm doing. And then, so that's really kind of where everything changed for me in 2019 really is when I went like full force. I'm just going to go all in on podcasting, and I've never looked back, and I love it so much. So in a nutshell, I'm the biggest podcasting geek you will ever find.
I love it. Well, it's such a pleasure and an honor to be on your show a couple of weeks ago. That was just so much fun. I can't wait for that to drop and share it out with the world. And I love your story. It's similar, yes. I think, to a lot of people's journeys. You know, you think that you're supposed to be this, and then all of a sudden something else comes along and you're like, oh no, well maybe, but should it? And so you just keep on your path, just keep taking action every single day in the direction of your dreams, and know that you're always on the right path. Your success is inevitable, but it's not going to be a linear journey. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be times when you question yourself. There's going to be times when you cry and you bang your head against the wall going, is this really for me? And you're going to question yourself again and again and again. And you just have to keep going, knowing that it's out there, right? And the journey is part of the fun of it. Yeah. I wish I'd actually enjoyed that first part of my journey, rather than coming from this place of lack and desperation. And I have to be, like you said, the best. And I have to get there like fast. And it doesn't happen like that. Very rarely does it happen like that.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. Exactly. So let's talk a little bit more about business strategies. So when it comes to being a podcast coach and helping other women find their place, what is the first words of wisdom that you would share with them, not necessarily in setting up a podcast, but in setting up a business?
For sure. So what I have, like, you know, and it's really cool because with podcasting, you know, whether you've monetized a podcast or not, you can measure it, right? Because you get downloads, you can kind of see your listeners, and you can see, and I'm a super nerd on spreadsheets and looking at statistics. I love looking at that stuff and like kind of interpreting, well, what does this mean? And so in doing that, so if you're producing any kind of content, if you're doing Facebook Lives, Instagram Lives, however you're connecting with your audience, I want you to become obsessed with understanding exactly who they are. Because I'm sure, Sarah, like you have probably had this experience as well, where you start trying something out and you're like, I don't really know who this is for, who I'm talking to. And it all feels really messy. Like the water's pretty murky and you're just like, I think this is the route I want to go. But once you start putting yourself out there, you realize really quickly the people you want to talk to and the people you do not want to talk to, which I think is actually more important, because, you know, I'm sure people have heard about the attract and repel factors, you know, whenever it comes to marketing. But I mean, it just became so much clearer when I understood exactly who I was talking to. You know, I teach podcasting, but I don't teach equipment and software. I mean, there's tons of people out there who are audio engineers and they went to school to study all these things. And I say, let them have fun. They love that stuff. Let them do that. And the people that come to me are more looking for content. How can I understand, you know, what to talk about every single week? And so I knew this. And I've had people say, well, you should know everything that there is to know about equipment and software and editing and all these things. And I'm like, why? Those aren't like, people don't come to me for those, because you could have a perfect microphone setup, everything. You could have $1 million studio, but you could still sit down and say, okay, now what do I talk about? Like, what am I actually doing here? So my word of advice to anyone that's starting is, first of all, we understand if you're scared. We were scared when we started too. Like, you're not alone in the journey, and sharing that with other people kind of takes that fear away. But becoming absolutely obsessed with understanding who you're trying to serve will help you become a better marketer, a better business owner, and just serve your audience a lot better, to where they'll just start flocking to you. And you're like, I don't even I mean, how did I get invited to this party? Like, how do all these people know who I am? Which is the crazy thing that's happened, in putting that stake in the ground and saying, hey, let me help you with your
I love
podcast.
that.
So,
And so there's a little bit of transparency in that. There's a little bit of vulnerability in that. There's a lot of authenticity in that. So let's talk about
yeah.
like imposter syndrome, and because you think that you should be somewhere so much faster and this person's done this or that or whatever. And uh, it's a thing, isn't it? It really is. And
Oh,
so
100%.
authenticity, I think,
100%.
steals the imposter syndrome, because you can only be you. And so if you're trying to be like somebody else or embody somebody else's values, or like lean into what your soul is telling you and what you're being called to do, and who is following you and what they want more from you, right? So what are your tips for overcoming that sort of impatience, but also the imposter syndrome, and just staying on the path of authenticity?
For sure. So, I want to start with a story, right? Because, like I said, I love telling stories. But I have to tell you, when I first started helping other people with their podcast, I was hit with a situation where someone launched their show and they were 5 times more successful with their launch than I ever was. And oh, that envy and jealousy set in. Like, what? How? What? And I was just jealous, and I was just kind of like, I did something wrong because I told them all these things, but they were so grateful. And I think it was imposter syndrome. I was like, oh, you can tell this person to do it, but your podcast isn't as
Right?
successful. And so I just encourage anybody who, if you teach some sort of framework, or if you're trying to help somebody get a certain amount of results, it's okay if your students or your clients or people that you serve are more successful than you, because one, it is a testament to the actual framework and everything that you're teaching. But two, it just means like if you worked on this for a year, they just got the microwave version of it, right? Like they got the behind the scenes of here's the secret sauce to actually make this work. So I've experienced imposter syndrome all along the way. Podcasting is one of those fields where thankfully there's starting to be a lot more female leaders coming on the scenes. But I went to a podcast conference and it was mostly men that were the
Wow.
keynote speakers. So, it's just it's one of those things where I'm like, who am I to talk about this? I don't know I haven't been around for 15 years podcasting. I've been doing this for a relatively short amount of time. So my tip for someone who is struggling with podcasting, if you're struggling with podcasting, come to me. But if you're struggling with imposter syndrome, I want you to take a step back and say, why am I looking at other people to really kind of define my own worth, my own value? Because that's really what it is. That's all imposter syndrome is, because you have everything inside of you to be successful. And it may take you longer than you initially thought. It may mean that you have to stay up later than you thought you were going to have, or you have to get up at 5 a.m. to really put in the hours. But what people don't see behind the scenes, how you talk to yourself, how you reassure yourself, how you are grateful for every step of the process, is going to mean so much to you, the entrepreneur, along your journey, than just constantly chasing the approval of other people, because it's not fulfilling. It's not. Even if you get it from the people that you're seeking it from, you're going to say, man, I really compromised myself the whole way. So I would just tell you, stay true to who you are. I am loud, I'm obnoxious, I talk all kinds of shenanigans on my show, but if I had tried to change who I am and be this other person who I thought I was supposed to be for my brand and for my podcast, I would be very unhappy right now. And I love what I do. I love that I can show up and just be 100% myself. And it makes all the
For
difference in the
sure. I
world.
love that. And something you just said too about the steps that you've got to take along the way reminds me of this conversation that I had yesterday. I'm so excited. We've got our first fiduciary money manager that we're going to be working with going forward. So yay, I'm
Yay!
so excited. We were having this awesome strategy call yesterday, and he was talking about just like the fundamentals. Like you can't build the house without the base. And he's like, you can't skip a step. Like, you can't start with this massive, investment or whatever if you haven't laid this first. So, let's do this, and then we're going to go here,
Right.
and then we're going to go here, and then we're going to go here. We're going to grow together. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so just like business, right? Like, you got to start somewhere, and then you got to build on that. So let's talk about that growth journey and what that looks like. Sometimes you get stuck, don't you? And you feel a little bit like you plateaued, and it's like chewing glass, and like you kind of spiral into this panic, right? And you're like, where's the next one going to come from? What's going to happen next? Where do I go? And then you start thinking, do I pivot? Do I what? Da 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 da. And so how do you kind of like ground yourself and pull it all back? And my phone, I don't know what's going on with it, but it's telling me that I'm on low battery, even though I've been charging it for the last like hour. So I'm going to have to change position so I can charge up and take my headset out. So the noise from my end is not going to be that great, the sound quality, but that's okay because I'm just asking you questions on this interview, and then I'll come back on with the headset at the end so we can round it out if that's okay with you.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
do you want me to go ahead and answer the question? Okay. So hang on one second. So I love this question because I actually, with 2020, right, the word of the year is pivot.
Yes.
It's pivot. Like, we've had to be reactive. We've tried to be proactive, and it blows up in our face. We're like, oh, I'm going to do this. And then it's like, oh, actually, no, that's not going to work. And so I can give you a personal example. I'm actually in the middle of revamping my programs. I have 2 separate programs right now. I have a digital course and I have a membership. And I reactively started my membership during COVID because I was like, I don't think my people can really afford my course right now. So I pivoted. But now that I've made this move, I'm like, I don't know that these 2 programs work together. It's like there's all kinds of friction. And as a business owner, wherever you are on your journey, if you have friction, do not ignore it. You need to pay attention to what that is and kind of follow the clues to what it actually means when you're experiencing friction, whether it's personally, like if you're overwhelmed, you're frustrated, you're just like, I'm not getting anywhere. Pay attention to what that is. It could be managing your own expectations, whether you thought you were going to be further faster. Then you're like, hang on, let's talk to an expert, right? Let's talk to a coach. Let's find a mentor who can tell you actually you're right where you're supposed to be at this stage in your business. But for me, I was super frustrated that my messages just felt off. I had these 2 programs and I wanted to tell people about it, right? Like, as business owners, we have to be able to sell with confidence, with our shoulders back, and just say, this is what I do. If you want this, scream it out to the world. But I wasn't feeling that. And so whenever it comes to really having those steps in place, those building blocks that are going to propel you forward and help you scale your business, everything has to be first level. And that's where I felt like, it's funny because my dad was a plumber. He was a plumber like my whole life. So I totally get the metaphors of building a house and like building something. And I worked for a construction company. That's another story for another day. But I totally get this metaphor of like, you got to have like the dirt work done correctly. Most people are like, oh yeah, throw some concrete down. And it's like, no, hang on. If you are not on solid ground, you're going to have all kinds of problems. So you could have beautiful sconces and tiered ceilings and all the things. But if you don't have the foundation properly set for your business, it's going to crumble or it's going to be tilted off its axis or whatever. So if someone's listening and they're like, I'm struggling in my journey, I'm frustrated, you've got to pay attention. And I'm a journaler. I love to write. And so it's as simple as you could take a notebook, and it's funny because I have one right here. I love these little notebooks you can buy like for 25 cents whenever school supplies are on sale. But I would buy that and say, okay, I'm frustrated because, and just start writing and see what comes up. It could be that you're using the wrong software. It could be as simple as, oh, I'm trying to talk to people on Facebook, but my audience is really on Instagram. There's no telling where the issue is, but until you start exploring that, I mean, it's just going to continue to be frustrating, and you may end up quitting. And Sarah and I do not want you to quit. There is so much abundance out there that we want you to keep going. So pay attention whenever you get caught in those moments of
Oh, I love
friction.
that. Can you hear me okay? Is the sound quality all right? Okay.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. You sound great.
so I love what you just said. All of that is totally resonates. And it's interesting you said that because I've been thinking about something lately, and that is just going all in and focusing on one platform for 30 days and treating it like my baby
Yeah.
and not trying to be so like all over the place all the time. Have you ever tried that as a strategy, or do you recommend to your clients to like visibility is everything, right? But if you're not getting the messaging right or your audience is on a different platform, you know, it's hard to call that business in.
Right. So whenever it comes to social media specifically, I easily get overwhelmed. And I don't call it my strong suit just because I'm kind of a rule breaker. It's funny. I'm a rule follower in most things in my life. But as soon as someone gives me the rigid guidelines of you have to stay in this box of what you do with your content, I'm like, I'm gonna blow up the box. I don't want, no, you're not gonna tell me to post this many times on these places. Like I'm kind of like a rebel when it comes to content. So, but what I typically do is I find one platform that I will engage. Like this is the most important piece because you can post all over the place, but you know that you can't engage with people all over the place. And I think that that's the component is a lot of people think, well, I posted to all these places, but nothing's happening. And I say, well, how are you actually engaging with your people? Are people sending you messages? Are you answering their comments? Are they sending you DMs on Instagram? Are they tagging you in things on Facebook? That's what I would most pay attention to. And it's funny because I actually have still kind of a mix. I'm mostly on Facebook and Instagram. I don't play around with any of the other ones. I gave up a long time ago on anything else. This is where I focus. But I have more success with Facebook Lives than I do with IG Lives. But I have more success with stories on Instagram than I do on stories with Facebook. So I do have kind of a mix on which content I put where. But at the end of the day, if someone is interacting with me, that's what I'm going to focus on. So I focus more on the engagement and interaction because learning, again, like becoming obsessed with my audience is one of my core values because they'll tell me what they need. They will. If you just start asking and you're patient, which that's, that's a whole other topic. We like, that's an hour-long discussion right there. Just being patient with the process. But if you are patient enough and you really listen, your audience will tell you exactly what they want from you, what they need from you, and how they want you to deliver it to them. You just have to be quiet enough and responsive enough to give it to
And
them.
asking questions too. I mean, engagement posts are great for getting feedback on, what do you want from me? Do you want to see more mindset, or do you want to see more business strategy, or do you want to see more spirituality, or like what do you want to see from me? And then you could give them more of what they want, right? So it's just
Yeah, for
asking the
sure.
questions, taking the answers, and then building around that. And sometimes, it is a process and a testing phase, isn't it? To be patient, just keep,
For sure.
showing up in the best way that you can, and
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be complicated either. Like, I mean, like I'm thinking of just yesterday, I was doing a bunch of stuff for my YouTube channel and I did a 15-second, IG reel or not, it wasn't a reel. That's a totally different story. It was a story, an IG story. And I was like, hey guys, I'm in my office. This is what I'm doing. Do you want to see more behind the scenes videos like this? And I had 10 people, like I did one of the little polls and I had 10 people say yes. And I'm like, okay, well, now I know I need to do more behind the scenes things like this. So it's those little micro things. It's not these big, like huge, like, okay, I got to sit down for 30 minutes and write out this perfectly captioned post. It's not that. It's the little micro engagements with your audience that really make the difference. And if you can build something into your business where you have those every single day with your audience, it's that compounding effect that you're just like, I know my people now. I know what they want from me. I know how to deliver it, and I know how they will engage with it whenever I actually put that piece of content out
That's so
into the
true. I love
world.
that. So to recap that, basically we're both building on Facebook and Instagram mostly. I'm learning LinkedIn right now. It's not my favorite, but so feel around for like where is your strength and just build on that strength. And then get to know your audience, engage,
For
and
sure.
give them what they want. So
Absolutely.
I just had a great question in my head and I just went, content, asking questions.
Oh,
I
somebody
think
just
just having
posted the
fun,
question.
right? Let's see. What if you've been MIA in your private Facebook group since having a baby and now showing up as the admin? That's a good question.
So I can actually talk about this because I have had a free Facebook group for my podcast for it was like a repurposed group actually. So I just kind of repurposed this group. I had about 100 people in there. I think I started it in like 2016 whenever I was first like, I think I'm gonna have an online business. I don't know what I'm doing, but come along for the ride. And then when I started my podcast, I didn't want to start from scratch, so I just repurposed it. But there was literally nothing that happened in that group unless I put out, like, all I did was take what I shared on my page and I put it in the group. And I just said, oh, there's a new podcast episode. And I just shared it in the group. And I got no engagement. There was no questions being asked in there. I mean, I'm a part of some really big groups and it's just like fire and like fireworks and all kinds of cool things. And I'm just like, I want that. I want my group to be that. And so how I started re-engaging my audience. So first of all, you have two options. You can decide, do I want to keep this group? Is it full of my people or do I need to start another one? And then the second option is to re-engage them with weekly posts. And and I don't know where you are in your journey. What was her name? It was Jennifer. Yeah, Jennifer, I don't know where you are in your journey, but even if you can just write out a few posts and schedule them for the whole month. I try to do this. I have a share one where I'm like, hey, share your podcast episode. So people come in every Wednesday and they know that they can share their brand new podcast episode. But I like to have kind of themed days. So Monday is a Monday mindset post, and then Tuesday is Tuesday tips, and then Thursday is story time, and Friday is action item Friday. And so every week I will write my post before, but like, so I haven't written the ones for next week. I'll write those and then I schedule them out and they're in the group. And then I tell people, comment below with, your takeaway from this post or what you're working on. So it's helping me learn more about them, but people are actually starting to ask questions in the group as outside of my post. And I'm like, something's finally working. I'm like, yay, and it's not a huge group. I think it might have 500 people in there. So, and I mean, I'm part of groups that have thousands and thousands, but what I love about it is all of these people are super interested in my topic. So, Jennifer, I would advise you to just keep it like, hey, this is who we are in this group. This is what we're about. And of course, here's the rules. Don't do this, do that. But just trying to start those conversations that will get people talking to themselves organically. It's almost like you're setting up a party for people to kind of mingle and talk with each other, because you will learn so much more about your audience with the way they interact together, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
And I think too, just maybe once a month, I'll do like a allow me to reintroduce myself post on my personal page, because you get so many new friends and followers, and it's kind of like, let's engage, let's network, let's get to know each other. And that might not be a bad idea too, is to kind of come into the group and also have a little bit of vulnerability there and just be like, here's what I've been going through and here's what's up and here's where we're going now. So don't really focus on how you haven't been showing up, but focus on where you're taking them, if that helps.
Yeah, for sure. That's great advice.
Gardening group is her audience and subject. Had another friend be the admin, and now he left because he doesn't like your style. Up to 10,000 members. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And they're mostly new. So yeah, I would keep going. That's a great size group. Test it and see what works. That's what I tell my clients. Awesome. We keep testing until we get it just right.
Yeah, that's awesome. And whenever it comes to, just like trying to get that re-engagement, try to find a few people that you already know that are either in your industry or even friends of yours and say, hey, if you have a question, instead of DMing me, or if someone DMs you or emails you, say, hey, can you ask that same question in our group? Because I do this all the time. Someone will send me a DM and I'm like, hey, thank you for asking, but I think there's going to be 10 other people that have the same question. So can you ask it in the group and I'll answer you, and then other people can kind of learn from it as well. But it also gives you that social proof. So I'm a huge marketing nerd. I'm podcasting, marketing, like all of it blended together. I'm just a huge nerd, but I love finding social proof. So you can actually use people's, never use anything without someone's permission, their name or their image or anything. But I like to take questions from groups that I'm in and create other pieces of content. And I'll say, hey, this awesome question was asked. I do this all the time for my podcast. And I'll say, this question was asked in this podcast community that I'm a part of. I'm going to answer it for you here. So you could do the same thing in a Facebook Live. You could say, this question was asked so many times this last week that I want to address it here on a Facebook Live. And then hopefully people will come to your live. You can engage with them that way, but it's a way to get people like, oh, I need to start paying attention to that group because it's super valuable information.
And those questions that keep coming up too. I mean, that is like all content creation and like repurposing. I had 5 women reach out to me yesterday in maybe like a 5-minute period. It was like so bizarre. It was uncanny. And I actually did a post about this yesterday, but they were all like, I'm really struggling with consistency in my messaging and also consistency in showing up. And I get it. Like, it can be so distracting with what's going on right now with COVID and the election and work and just other commitments that we already have if we're parents or wives or daughters or sisters or friends or aunts and all the different hats we wear as women while also running households. And, it can be really hard some days to go, where am I going to show up? How am I going to show up? And so I think consistency is another great topic that we could go on for hours, but just last one, what is like your biggest tip when it comes to being consistent in your business with all the other distractions that we could use as excuses?
Yeah, so I have a commitment. It's actually one of my like guiding principles, and that is no matter what, I will put out a piece of content every single week. And when I say content, that's relative to my podcast and my YouTube channel. All the other stuff, even if I didn't post on social media for a month, that's fine. But I am radically obsessed with being consistent with my main pieces of content. And the reason why, and I put out a whole lot of content, which we need to talk about content in another, we need to do this again and talk about content and consistency. But my number one tip is like, you just have to make that commitment. And then Jennifer, I know you said you just had a baby. Maybe what that looks like for you is planning, like take 1 hour like every single week and just plan it all out. This is all the things that I'm going to do. And then another hour, you could actually create it, whether that means typing it up or, creating graphics, whatever that looks like for you. And then the next one, if you wanted to do 3 hours a week, you could take that time and just schedule it all out. So you are done, whether it's for a month, for a week, however long you wanted to batch content out into the future. But being consistent is the key. It really, really is. And if that's the hardest thing that you're struggling with, then start small. Start small with, I'm going to post a blog post, a podcast, a YouTube, IG Live, whatever that looks like for you, every single week at this time, come rain or shine, come hell or high water, it's going to happen. But only one of those things,
not all of those things.
And once you not all of those things. No. One of those things. And hopefully it's once a week, but if you can't commit to that, it's like you're signing a contract with yourself, because once you start to take yourself seriously, that's when other people show up and say, hey, what's Jennifer doing over there? Like, she's been talking about this gardening stuff and she's really into it. And other people will start to notice, but that consistency is the key to other people actually saying, oh, she's delivering value. I should really pay attention to what she's doing because the last thing she put out was so helpful. So I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to watch Jennifer. I'm going to see what she's doing.
And she's my go-to because she knows what she's talking about, because you stand out as the expert in your field when you show up consistently, because nobody else does. It's very few and far between. So,
for sure.
When it comes to scheduling content, too, I would recommend scheduling it through Facebook itself so that you can be present when people comment so that you know exactly when that post is going out. Write it in your calendar, put it on your whatever scheduler it is that you use, and then that way, just before that post goes live, you can engage and interact and heat up your algorithm to get more engagement going on those posts, and then also to stick around afterwards to make sure that you comment and engage with the people who commented and engaged, and then Facebook will push that out farther than if you use an outside application. She says, I'm afraid to do.
Yeah, I love Creator Studio.
I'm afraid if I do schedule a few topics each day of the week or once a week, my group would be okay about it. Right now it's a type of form that everyone posts when they want. Yeah, well, that's cool, because then they can all post whenever they want, but then you're also showing up powerfully for them in a way that's consistent and engaging and getting even more interaction going in there. What do you think, Krystal?
Yeah. And then, well, all I was going to say is the most powerful groups that I can think of is whenever the admin or someone that's running the group, whenever they have a post, they mark it as an announcement at the top. That way, no one misses it, right? So like people can still be talking and there's all kinds of conversations going on below, but at the very top, they have that sticky, like, this is our latest post. This is what we want you to see first. So you have a little bit more control about making sure that your people are seeing what you've posted first and then all the other conversations below. That would be my advice.
Love it. Love it. Well, Krystal, thank you so much for today. And I'm sorry, you guys, that I had to move around positions. I'm like sitting on the floor in front of my bookshelf here with my phone charger.
You look like you're glowing. Like there's this like sun, like you're glowing. You got the light.
Yeah, there's this like giant window right here. But I just want to thank you so much for your time. And guys, if you have any other questions that we didn't get to answer today, just drop them in the comments below, and Krystal and I will be happy to answer them in the comments. Krystal, how can our audience find you, and what are the next steps? What's an action step they can do to reach out to you?
Yeah, so if you're interested in podcasting, like Sarah said earlier, you can check out my podcast. It's called the Proffitt Podcast with 2 F's and 2 T's. But you can go to krystalproffitt.com/podcast bootcamp. And I actually have a free 5-day video training series that will walk you through all the steps of podcasting. Because most people are like, again, the equipment, the software, like it all just feels so overwhelming. And I remember feeling that way when I started. So I created this quick 5-day video series that it's just like, here's the ins and outs of how it needs to go down. And I just want people to show up with confidence behind the microphone. It is literally my mission in life, is I want people to sit down, whether it's live on camera, behind a podcast microphone, on stage, whatever that looks like, with their shoulders back and they're confident that they're speaking exactly who they want to speak to. And then you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. I'm Krystal Proffitt TX.
Awesome. Well, if you have any links you want to drop in the comments below so everybody can come and check you out, that would be awesome. And if any of you are interested in learning more about working with me as far as business strategy goes, mindset, all things just creation and attraction marketing and becoming the hunted as opposed to the hunter, definitely reach out to. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, and I'd love to connect. My inbox is always open. So thanks, you guys, and we'll see you next week. Same place, same time on the business.
Thank you so much for having me.
Speak soon. Bye.